So you're very welcome back to another video. Now in today's one, we're going to go through why your Klaviyo strategy is not working and what to do instead. Now the main reason why I wanted to create this video is because over the last number of weeks, I've audited multiple 7 and 8 figure brands and they're literally making all of the exact same mistakes. So what I've done is I've distilled these into the top 5 mistakes these brands are making, and I guarantee your brand is making also, and what to actually do instead. So how to counteract these or to actually even ignore these mistakes altogether. Now, before we dive into the video, just to showcase I actually know what I'm talking about, my name is Adam. I'm the founder and head of strategy at Gen Z Media, and we're responsible for over $50 million in client revenue. And we primarily help with increasing customer LTV, repeat purchases, and customer loyalty through email and SMS marketing. Now, that we have that out of the way, let's kind of dive into the meat and bones of the video. So first of all, we're going to go to mistake number 1, and that is that flows are set once and they're completely forgotten. This is the biggest mistake that I'm seeing because, as you can imagine, if you're running a 7 or 8 figure brand, a 1%, a 2%, a 3% change in any part of this funnel is going to add up to enormous amounts of revenue in a 12-month period. Now, what I'm saying here is that of course, you do have certain flows that might not need to be, I suppose, changed as often as others. For example, we have a welcome series or an abandoned checkout that will probably need to be tested, iterated pretty often because these are large revenue generators with large amounts of traffic going through them. I'm not here saying that you should be A/B testing absolutely every single email in your funnel. But what I would do is I would look at your core flows, your welcome, cart, checkout, browse, potentially your site abandonment as well, even your post purchase, and primarily focus on the first emails of each of those flows, mainly your abandonment flows, because they're going to get a lot of traffic. They're going to be the most engaged with, most opened, most clicked emails in your entire funnel. So you're going to get data very, very quickly. Now, these flows should be seen as performance assets. They should not be seen as something that you just set up once and forget and never come back to them, right? So what you should do instead here is, rather than setting these up once and just completely throwing it out of your mind, you should really be A/B testing these, or at least reviewing these monthly. That kind of depends on how much traffic these flows are getting. Ideally, you still want to see 1,000 recipients for both variations before you start seeing any bit of statistical significance. So of course, this frequency is going to totally depend on how much traffic your brand is getting. But I will say, at the very least, your welcome series email number 1, that should be definitely getting split tested. Now, you will get a lot of agencies out there who will just split test absolutely everything to look busy, but realistically, I'm kind of talking about where can we test things where it's going to give us the highest impact, and that generally is going to be in your core flows. Things to be tracking here as well is revenue per recipient, placed order rate of course, and of course, at the end of the day, anything bar revenue driven is of course just kind of a side metric. It's not as important. So of course, looking at revenue driven as well. Now, the second mistake that I'm seeing is that campaigns are being sent across a lot of brands without any bit of strategy or intention behind them. And the biggest killer I see for specifically bigger brands is that they're doing a lot of blanket sending. So if you have a list of, let's say, 100,000 people and you're sending out to the bulk of that the same message, the same copy, the same design, there's absolutely zero personalization there, and customers are becoming more and more sophisticated as time goes on. So if you're not getting a bit more personalized, a bit more relevant, because relevancy is absolutely key when it comes to email marketing campaigns, your emails are just going to get ignored after a certain amount of time. So that's kind of what to do instead. Just try to basically segment based off of purchasing behavior, which we'll talk about in a second as well in a later point, but keeping your content fresh to the customer that you're speaking to. You don't want to be sending a buyer, for example, a review-based campaign because they've already purchased. So you don't want to be sending these blanket campaigns. And I'm still seeing 7 and 8 figure brands actually do this. Now, of course, you don't want to get too granular with your segmentation either, and it depends on your list size. But there's no point in segmenting customers out by, their blood type or whatever that may be. Of course, segmenting based off of purchase behavior. Are they a new customer? Are they, a high LTV customer? Are they a non-buyer? Have they just recently signed up to the newsletter? So trying to make the content as relevant as possible is how these top brands are winning in 2025. And if you are sending out these blanket sends, people are literally just going to switch off to your campaigns. At the end of the day, 80% of people, 90% of people aren't even going to be reading your full email anyway. So just trying to make that hero image in particular super, super relevant to the person that you're talking to should even help in itself, to be honest. Now, onto the third mistake is the pop-up strategy. This is probably the most ignored thing that I see across literally every brand that I audit. the growth of the list is literally like oxygen to your whole entire strategy. If the list growth slows down, your welcome series revenue is going to start tanking. And then of course that is limiting the amount of new contacts who are then able to receive campaigns on a weekly basis, however often you're sending out, but you should be sending at least 2 to 4 campaigns weekly. Literally I've seen brands with 20,000 plus, monthly site visitors, even though that's a relatively low enough amount, with pop-up conversion rates of like 2%, which is criminal. So what I would suggest doing here is, of course, always be A/B testing your pop-up form. That's probably the number one thing to be A/B testing all of the time, because if you can increase the amount of people coming into your email list by a certain percentage, that is going to have a massive knock-on effect later on in your strategy. Now, again, the last point I have down at the bottom is kind of cut off by my head's in the way, but you don't have to be married to a 10% off offer as well. And the core thing to be testing here is offers on the pop-up form, because realistically, that is what's going to drive the most results. That's going to have the highest impact, as opposed to changing the button color on your pop-up form. Of course, that is low effort, but it's not necessarily going to drive the highest impact. So definitely focus on offers and think about offers that are actually going to be marginally more sense for the brand as well, or for your brand or for your client if you're working with e-commerce brands. Because sometimes even a free gift might actually be better, might be lower cost than offering a 10 to 20% discount. Now, the fourth mistake that I'm seeing is absolutely no behavior-based segmentation. We've already kind of spoken about this. We already touched about this in the blanket sense through campaigns, but really have a look at your list and see, okay, who are the engaged contacts? Who are the unengaged contacts? Who viewed but didn't purchase? Who's high LTV? Who's a one-time buyer who we could potentially push to make a second purchase, by the way, which is a very high leverage thing to do, because if you get that, that customer who's purchased once, but hasn't made the second order to come back, you're exponentially increasing the chances of them coming back again and again and again. Of course, depends on the product that you're selling. Of course, if you're selling mattresses, it's a totally different buying cycle. And again, you kind of have to adjust your strategy based off of the brand type. But of course, in most cases, if you really push that customer to the to the second purchase, it's massively going to increase them coming back a third, fourth, fifth time. But as I said earlier in the video, relevance equals revenue. How can you make these campaigns more relevant to the customer who's reading them? And that is absolutely key, and probably a huge thing that I see, even some top brands missing. Now, the last point we have here is treating Klaviyo like a tool and not a strategy. Klaviyo is an absolutely fantastic tool. There's massive amounts of data that you can pull from your customers here. And I'm really surprised when I talk to, 7-8 figure operators, they don't even realize the type of data that you can extract from your Klaviyo account. And perhaps I might make another video on this, on another date, but you really should be looking at things at a more granular level. If you are at that 7-8 figure level, looking at how long does it take a customer from when they join my email list to when they purchase? What is the average time to order? That's a key thing to be tracking. What is my revenue per recipient on my core flows over time? Is that increasing? Is that decreasing? Of course, that is going to be a function of traffic as well. So you have to take that into consideration. And also as well, having a look at your 12-month retention roadmap. And what I mean by that is try to map out your average customer. What does that journey look like over a 12-month period? That could even be shorter as well, of course, because it depends again on what kind of brand you have and what kind of product you're selling. But really for most brands, let's say it's a supplement, for example, having a look at and seeing what is the end goal. So where do we want to get them to? So realistically, we want to get them to being a non-buyer or a person who hasn't purchased a product before, to purchasing once, purchasing a second time potentially, or else, going straight to a subscription, or else even going straight to a subscription without even purchasing a one-time product altogether. So there's many different kind of options, but really mapping that kind of stuff out and then building your email and SMS strategy on top of that to try and support those different customer journeys, those different possibilities. Another example I would give here is really having a look at your acquisition, seeing what types of products are bringing in the most new customers, and then building back-end flows off of that to try and cross-sell them onto other products to try and get them across your whole product suite. Of course, if it makes sense. But this is something that I'm not seeing brands use a whole lot, to be honest. So I think that pretty much wraps up the video. If you'd like to obviously get more tips, more tricks, more email marketing hacks in your email newsletter, drop your email down below in the link in the description. And if you are running an e-commerce brand and want a free audit from myself and have a chat with a team of, dedicated experts related to retention marketing, increasing customer lifetime value and customer loyalty, I'll have the link to my Calendly down below in the description. Give that a click. And if not, no pressure whatsoever. Hopefully you got some value from this video, and I will catch you on the next one.